Yes, it is I, the Warhammer Cat. I don't think I'm the only Warhammer Cat. There's probably other ones that they probably do other Warhammer things. Sometimes they probably bonk people in the head, but I don't really do that. I mostly go whoop, and then stuff happens. Anyway, they just released this thing, the Old World Almanac. Your first look at the rules. So I figured I would take a look at it. Um, and I will say, thus far, the only thing I've really gleaned from this article is that the Old World art is just, oh man, it is so good. Look at that. That just looks so great. That looks great. The Old World is nearing release in early 2024. Okay. So they have a slightly different structure than the game had originally. There's a strategy phase. This is, as far as I can tell, this is just going to be basically your command phase or whatever the hell it's called, and hero phase in Age of Sigmar. Movement phase, pretty simple. Shooting phase and combat phase. In going through this and looking at it a little bit, I'm like, okay, yeah, it looks like it'll be fine. Probably. I don't know. I am very, very cautious about the old world because I cannot help but think that there are systems that just did Warhammer better than GW ever did. Like Warhammer Army Projects and, who is it? Ninth Age and some other stuff. I think there's some stuff that does really good Warhammer rules. But it is really nice just to see this just because we get to see some of this older art on there, and it looks pretty great. Like, that troll looks terrifying. That one's going, blah, and that's kind of gross, right? Falcon. And they're gonna let you have the enchanted items. Falcon Horn of Redmond. During the command sub-phase of their turn, if they are not engaged in combat, this character may attempt to use the Falcon Horn by making a leadership test using their own unmodified leadership. If the test is passed until the start of the next turn subphase, enemy units cannot use the Fly X special rule. I guess that could be useful in very specific circumstances, like if you're fighting against an army with like a lot of things. What it's already kind of making me a little bit cautious or a little bit weary is command subphase. How many subphases are we gonna get? Wait, for example, Stone Trolls would take their stupidity test at this juncture, and it's also when Night Goblin fanatics are placed on the table. If we can just get some regular old Night Goblins, that would be really nice. I don't really like the what you call it, the little weird spidery goblins they have now. I prefer just regular old Night Goblins. They were weird enough and cool. The third step of the strategy phase is Conjuration, which is when you cast enchantment, magical boosts for your allies, or hexes, magical penalties to your enemies. Players take it in turns during this step to choose wizard or fleeing to attempt to cast spells. The Tomb Kings, for instance, might choose to cast the Jeff's Incantation of Cursed Blades. Okay. Yeah, I really don't know how I feel about having like a bunch of sub phases inside of an existing phase, especially if you're supposed to do them in a certain order. Like, I guess there's a little bit of that in the command phase now in like 40k, but the final step in this phase is to rally fleeing troops. Okay. I don't know. The more I've been looking at this, the more I'm kind of like, it could be fine. I think the problem with something like this, right, is that it's very difficult to see if something is actually going to be good until you play it. Warhammer, for instance, can seem like it's pretty fine until you play it for the first time and maybe something goes wrong, or like, especially if you're not used to like games where chance is a big part of it, where like you can just roll poorly and next thing you know, like you just lose a bunch of guys, or maybe your supposedly super effective weapon just for the first game of tabletop Warhammer I played with a friend of mine, for instance, he was playing Mechanicus, I was playing Orcs, and he should have killed a bunch of my boys several times. I just kept rolling 5s and 6s for their saves, and like a lot of 6s actually, and I was just like, okay, like dealing with a lot of this firepower, but because I just kept rolling 6s, it didn't matter and I was fine. There's stuff that you can do to like mitigate that sort of thing. And a lot of what it is that there's no, if you just look at one phase of this, it doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot. Like I'm not a big fan of them like having a bunch of much. Wait, let's see, several popular editions of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. Much of the complexity has been kept, and particularly regarding morale added. I personally really liked 6th and 7th edition, but that's also partially because those are the editions where I first came in and started playing. I think 6th edition is where you really started seeing art like this, for instance. And I think it really added to the flavor of the Warhammer world. It became way less cartoony in 6th edition. That's like, I think also as a game, it's pretty good. Here's the thing. Complexity can be good in particular ways. And like, if I have more strategies and more options, that's great. If, however, you have things like in, I think like 2nd edition of Warhammer 40k, the movement rules for vehicles were so complicated, and like turning and all this other stuff. There was like a whole chart that you had to figure out, and damage was a whole other thing there. It was not great, I think. I think it's kind of like complexity is good, but then I look at something like BattleTech. I don't really want to keep track of like which individual part of my model is damaged and what that changes and all. That's just not for me. If it's for you, great. I think a little bit more complexity would probably be decent for a game like this. However, I have to admit that I feel like, especially in tabletop games, there's a very fine line. There's a very fine line between getting the right amount of complexity and too complex. And especially if it's like a lot of fiddly bits that don't really seem to do very much, but they're just there as rules, then that's just not particularly good. Now, that being said, I think Warhammer Army Projects is decently complex, and I think it has the right amount. You can do strategy, you can do some different things. There's ways the rules interact with each other that you can use to your advantage. That's good. But there's a lot of times when you'll be playing something like this, and it's just like, it'll just be too much. Now, in this particular instance, I'm not seeing anything that would necessarily scream that it's going to be too much. I am a little cautious about like sub-phases, because that's another thing. You'll know that there's no magic phase in the game. Instead, magical powers and spells are cast during relevant phases. The Hand of Mork or Gork is a conveyance spell, which means it is cast in the movements phase, for instance. That's another thing. I like seeing that. Like you break down the magic into different components. I would almost argue it probably makes more sense to just have a magic phase. Just have a magic phase where you enhance and don't. That's what Army Projects does. I don't really think there's any reason to separate them. I guess maybe you could argue you get a little bit more play out of your wizards if they're in a bunch of different phases, and that can be cool, but like it seems to me. And here's another thing I'm noticing, by the way, about this. Until the start of your next turn sub-phase, any friendly unit that has the Nekaran Undead special rule, and that is within the caster's command range, may reroll any rolls to hit of a natural 1. So now, once you start getting into like, okay, so what I'm already seeing here is this is an enchantment spell. So already you got to know what the enchantment spells do and when they're used. Then it's the turn of the sub phase. So this is during the movement phase, but I'm assuming because there's going to be multiple phases, certain spells are going to last slightly longer than other ones, which is that's a little weird. But once again, it's kind of hard to tell what's actually going to happen until you see it. I'm just saying that when I look at this stuff, I'm kind of wondering how much of a complicated mess this is going to be. Because I kind of already feel like it's going to be a little bit of a... However, the third step of the strategy phase is Conjuration, which is when you cast enchantments. Or hexes, yeah. So, that's an enchantment. Anyway, I don't know. I think it'll be fine, maybe. And once again, you have to kind of wait to see it actually being played. And then the only other bit of news that I kind of wanted to look at for just a second, even though it's not related, is I think this model is kind of interesting. the Necron stuff where like he's like phasing out, so you can see like different parts of him like phasing into existence and stuff like that. But I'm also going to be 100% honest with you and say I don't really like it very much. I mean, this is a cool in concept, but I would rather have a whole model to paint and not just like a bunch of missing parts. Because like you would think like maybe it would be like there'd be like some kind of green or something there, but right now it just looks like he's missing a leg. And then on top of that, of course, he's on top of a tactical rock. I I really don't like the tactical. Infinity does so many tactical rocks. I mean, a lot of tactical rocks, man. And it's like one of the, as much as I like a lot of those miniatures, I detest the tactical rocks after a while. And it's just like, I don't know. I don't actually think it's very good. I think it's a cool concept. I just don't think it actually looks very good once it's actually like, because the way it's like phasing with like the digital type pattern. I'm just gonna have to be honest and say I just don't think it works very well. And I mean, it's kind of a thing with all. Oops. Except cookies. Yeah, sure. Oh, still high. It's like with a lot of these things where it's like, well, okay, how much is it gonna cost? Like for instance, Fulgrim's kind of cool. Fulgrim is not $124 cool. Fulgrim is, and I want you to look at this model for instance. Like, this is not $270 cool. Like, so many other companies and like 3D printing and stuff, you can get so much cheaper. So then I think about stuff like that, and then I look back at this guy and I'm like, how much is this guy gonna be? And he's probably gonna be at least $30 or $40. So you know, like even though he's kind of a cool miniature, especially for $30 or $40 though, I'm immediately like bad. And I guess that's kind of what I worry about with like the old world project. Well, one of the things I worry about is the complication, but also how much is it going to cost? Like, how much is it going to cost to field a unit of like elves or a unit of goblin wolf riders? Because right now, if you want to play Age of Sigmar, it ain't cheap, man. And I mean, I don't know. There's just a lot to think about, and there's a lot to see. Unfortunately, like I said, this is not giving me good vibes. However, you know, you gotta, like I said, you gotta wait and see until it's actually played. And if they get more art back like this kind of art, I'm totally in for it. I'm not a big fan of like the high fantasy art of like Age of Sigmar. I kind of prefer this low fantasy, kind of spooky, scary vibe that this stuff is going for a lot more. I think this stuff is great. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see. I don't necessarily want to be a Debbie Downer about the old world. It's just that every time I look at it, I'm just like, this looks like it's going to be kind of not great. And I mean, well, here, let's see, because there was another one that was from not that long ago. They were showing off the Bretonnian Knights, and I think I'll just kind of mention that too. Well, if I can find it, where was it? I didn't think it was that far back. Yeah, whatever. Maybe I may have even just scrolled by it. But yeah, like they showed off some images for like, oh, here they are. For like Bretonia. That's kind of a cool model, I guess. I don't like that it has the upper arm phase and it doesn't even look like you can move the arm to a different position. You're either going to have it up with a lance or up with a sword. Not really a big fan of, or I guess battle standard. Not really a big fan of that. Not really. I'm going to say that these look over-designed, but Bretonia's kind of always looked a little over-designed to me, so that's nothing new. But, like, especially when they, like, started putting some of the older models next to the, like, these guys, next to the, newer stuff, I kind of wonder how it's going to be. And I'm wondering if they're just going to, like, resell, like, old world models that they had, or are they going to do it? Because it seems like at least they're going to release some new stuff and they're going to release some old stuff. I think that what we're really going to see, and look at that, just have her standing on the base. Like, I see, like that one. That one's fine. Just stand on the base. Stand on the base. You don't need big rocks. You don't. What? That's barely a rock, but why is it even there? Like, just don't do that. Just have them stand on the base. They start to look so silly when you put like. Imagine that you're trying. what is she doing here? She like, well, I could just stand here and cast it, but I want to cast it on top of the flower. Which, I mean, that's fine, I guess, but I don't know. I hope that everybody who's looking forward to the old world, I hope when it comes out they have a lot of fun with it. And I hope that maybe I'm just being a little bit of a naysayer, and that when it actually comes out, I can have fun with it. Because I like the old world a lot more than I like Age of Sigmar. I barely like the factions in Age of Sigmar. I don't really like the designs of most of the models. I think they're way over-designed. And I am kind of curious to see new Empire miniatures, because I really like the Empire. And it would be also cool to see some new goblins, some new dwarves. Back in the day, at one point I had a 10,000 point dwarf army, because at least during 7th edition, like, a rather large percentage of your army could just be made up of heroes and lords. And I had a lot of lords and stuff like that that would lead just a ton of hammerers and other units for it, and it was great, great, great. I loved it. And I'm hoping that I can have fun with this, but it's part of it is going to depend how much is this going to cost when it comes out. I will probably just 3D print stuff, because to be really honest, I have miniatures that work for the Empire now that would just, I think they kind of blow pretty much anything I've seen from Games Workshop out of the water in terms of just nice detail and things like that. But yeah, like I said, and if you're looking forward to it, I hope you have fun with it, man. And I'm hoping I have fun with it too. I don't want to be a naysayer. Just like I cannot help but look at some of this stuff and go, I really can't help but look at this. If it's going to be Forge World prices are ridiculous. And I thought I heard something about them being Forge World, but I don't know if that's actually true. I have not had that confirmed. But if they're going to be Forge World, I'm pretty much already going to say nah. I might grab the rules and check them out, but I'm not going to play with Games Workshop miniatures. It also depends. Are they going to release a bunch of the armies at once? Or is it going to be like, okay, well, I've seen them do a decent amount of stuff with the Bretonnians. Is it going to be the Bretonnians and like Tomb Kings, and then everything else is like going to take ages to release? We'll have to see how that goes, though. Anyway, I hope that you all have an absolutely wonderful day, and, you know, maybe you can tell me something that you're looking forward to in the old world, or what else you got going on. Anyway, I hope that you all have a wonderful day, and I love you, and God loves you, and bye-bye.